going to continue to question to Q&A. Okay, Dr. Riyad, you have to be ready because there are lots of questions for you. All right. However, Dr. Riyad, so you are now in Lebanon, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so there is a similarity between Indonesia and Lebanon because we are surrounded by population also. So I mean, like, the Middle East is always be a very interesting context for all of us, especially with the problem of refugees and also relation between Christians and right. Can you share with us how theological education in Lebanon deal with this kind of social issues?
Yeah, thank you very much. Very good question. But first, I should get some coffee. In fact, what I'm drinking is Indonesian coffee. This is my favorite Sumatra coffee that I buy it here. So when I go to Indonesia, I will have my suitcase filled of Indonesian coffee.
Absolutely, absolutely. We will give you not only Sumatran coffee, but Japanese coffee, Papua's coffee.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think this is a very important question. Yes, there are many similarities between our context and your context, Paulina, because as you said, we are a minority within a big majority. But I must say that Lebanon, the country where I am now, is very different from other Arab countries because of the freedom that we have. And the freedom that we have was due to the strong Christian presence for many centuries in this country. So for instance, converts in Egypt, they cannot study theology in a seminary in Egypt. Lebanon is the only place where converts from can do theological training in this country. So there are many differences even within our region. The case study that I was going to share with you, and I will send it to you, about a seminary in Lebanon that serves the whole region of Middle East and North Africa, was able to understand the context, not just the church context, but also the cultural context, not just of in Lebanon, but also in other countries of the Middle East, North Africa, in order to equip students to deal with this context. And it is very complicated realities, political, social, religious, and so on. So what I would like to respond to your good question is that we really need to understand our context, not from just a biblical theological perspective, but we need also to employ political science, sociology, psychology of societies in order to have the right understanding of our context.
So it's very holistic education then, we can say that.
It is, yes, very true.
All right, okay. So I would like to invite Dr. Sarina to be with us also to respond to what Dr. Riyad Kasis already mentioned before.
Yes, I'm so excited. Be ready, Dr. Riyad. We have a lot of questions here. Let us start with the first one. From the research you have just shared with us, what are the factors that create a disconnection between seminary and the church? And what are some solutions can you offer to dissolve the disconnection? Let me continue. This question also for Dr. Sutrisna. Bapak Sutrisna, apakah Bapak juga mengamati bahwa fenomena ini juga terjadi di Indonesia, diskoneksi antara gereja dengan seminari? Okay, Dr. Riyad, you may go first.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarina. I mean, you ask very good question, this group. I'm really happy. So let me expand briefly in 2 points. First, why this connection is there, and maybe 1 or 2 practical ideas how we can bridge this gap. So why that this connection is there? One reason, or maybe a major reason, is that we inherited a Western way of doing theological education. Whether it is from Europe or whether it's from North America. So missionaries came and they taught us how to do theological education. In many cases, they did not understand the context where they are doing theological education. So they would bring their curriculum, courses, books, even until now, in many countries, thinking that what they have done in Europe or in the West or North America would be beneficial for us in Asia or the Middle East or Africa. So I think that would be one main issue, that we imported models of theological education that do not work for us. But I'm happy to say now that many institutions that I observe and work with globally are getting out of this paradigm, and they have changed their curriculum and their faculty to understand the realities on the ground. So maybe one or two practical ideas. I think, when theological institution designs a curriculum for maybe a master or bachelor or any kind of a certificate, we normally bring faculty members, academic dean, professors to design the curriculum. I think an important step forward is to invite church leaders to work with us when we design the curriculum. Because, I also teach theology in many seminaries. We think that curriculum design is for us as faculty members. We know what should be there in the curriculum. But in reality, we need to have the voice of the church, which could be pastors, but also professionals, teachers, carpenters, medical doctors, taxi drivers. All these should be part of our curriculum design. Each one would have his or her own perspective on what there should be. So I think one area is to invite not us as faculty members with PhDs to design the curriculum, thinking that we really understand everything about the church. The second thing that I would like to mention in practical terms is to write books for the church and for our society. We tend as theologians to write books for elite in the academia, and maybe sometimes we write academic papers, which is really important. But I think we should be able to translate our language into the language of the people on the street, the one who is driving the motorbike and the one who is selling fish in the open market. Are we able to translate our theological language into the language of the people, having strong foundation, but at the same time to be understood by the people in the street, in the marketplace? I think this could be two suggestions to bridge this gap between the seminary and the church. Thank you.
Thank you. I will continue from what Dr. Riyad Kasih has been helpfully explained to us. Kalau saya melihat, ini akan tergantung dari model sekolah teologinya. So will depend on which models. Is it a university model, a heavily academic study, or is it Bible school model, which is very practical? Seringkali yang terjadi kalau di Indonesia, yang terjadi adalah sebagian yang sangat kuat menekankan kepada akademis memang punya problem. Lulusan-lulusannya kemudian jadi tidak terlalu mengerti apa yang harus dilakukan secara praktis, tidak siap melayani baik di gereja maupun para church. Karena konsepnya penuh tapi tidak siap dengan kesiapan lapangan. Karakternya pun tidak dibentuk dan sebagainya. Sebagian yang lain sangat menekankan ke praktisnya, tapi secara kualitas akademis, konseptual itu lemah. Dan sekali lagi itu polarisasi. That is the polarization that happens in Indonesia. I notice some this direction, the other this direction. And that also happened, the first model, the academic study. I heard quite a lot of complaint in the master level. So DSM students are complained by the churches that, or even they complain themselves that what they studied about certain theological debates between Bultmann and Calvert and everything. So what does that has anything to do with the real practical challenges in their daily pastoral responsibility? Because many of them who come for THM studies, many of them, they still continue and they go back to serve as a pastor in churches, not in seminaries. So there's just one example. I just highlight one more thing that actually what I notice is more the disconnection between seminary and the society, because a lot of things being addressed is about church matters, as if Christian life is only centered around church matters. Thank you.
Yeah, so Bu Sarina, I think, Dr. Yakasis and also Dr. Sutrisna, is one of the very biggest responsibility to balance between, academically, yes, but practically also is very important, right?
I mean, what Sutrisna has just said reminded me of a quote that I heard from very veteran theological educator. He said, some theological institutions are preparing pastors for a church that does not exist.
Invisible chairs, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Bu Sarina?
This second one is very interesting and very provocative. I will read the question. Theological education nowadays has become more and more sophisticated. We have complex curriculum, modern classroom, expert in systematic theology, mission, church growth, leadership, so on and so forth. However, all these do not guarantee that we produce better graduates that meet the needs of the church. They may have wonderful skills in homiletics, but have no conviction in preaching. Knowledgeable about prayer, but do not kneel down to pray for the congregation. Have lofty theology about mission, but never go out to share about Jesus Christ to a single soul. Very knowledgeable about pathopsychology, but do not know how to handle a demon-possessed cases. So this is the question. Do we dare enough to go back to the basic, to be simple and down to earth like Jesus when he did theological training with his disciples? What would you respond, Dr. Riyad and Pak Sutrisna?
Okay, who wants to answer first? This very difficult question.
I will leave it to Sutrisna to answer.
Okay. Okay, I will do it first. Okay. So I think the world is progressing. We are going from Eden to the New Jerusalem. We are not going back to the garden. We are going to the city. So I think we should differentiate between the progress, development of technologies and everything, that we should give thanks, we should be grateful, we should celebrate, and we should make use with the best. We should differentiate between those developments and the foundation or the main points of how to shape people. For example, that people's heart will be shaped through their relationships with God. People's heart will be shaped in faith community that practice what it means to live as genuine Christian. People's heart will need to be challenged in their daily life struggles, difficulties, and at the same time, they can see the Lord is there and the Lord helped them and the faith community helped them to grow. So I think we should differentiate between the fundamentals and the developments. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Riyad, do you have any response for it?
Yes, maybe I mentioned 2 points. One is that I think the solution for this big dilemma that you have just stated, Sarina, in the question is that one solution is that to have integration of disciplines within the course that we teach at the seminary. For instance, my area is Hebrew and wisdom literature. That was my PhD research, and I have written and teach this material. So if I'm teaching on a wisdom book, I should include spiritual formation on a personal level in my teaching. Even if I'm teaching, exegesis of the text, I should include, and sometimes I do teach, and I ask my students to prepare a sermon on what I am teaching, and they say to me, but this is Old Testament exegesis course. It is not homiletics. It's not preaching course. But I try, for instance, my teaching that the student should integrate personal spiritual formation ministry outside the seminary, the life of the church, as well as being aware of right biblical exegesis. So I think one way of doing it is not to teach a course on spiritual formation or spiritual disciplines. This should be integrated in all what we do in the seminary. Second, we should not, I think, put much pressure on the seminary because, students come for 3 years or maybe 5 years, which is not enough. This is why you need the involvement in the life of the church. The church has the responsibility to bring maturity for the student during the study, as well as after, as well as before. So it is a combined responsibility for the spiritual maturity of the students. It is a combined responsibility of the church, the student herself or himself, as well as the seminary. So these three should cooperate together in such a good way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rian and Dr. Sutrisna. We have some question here about graduate program. So I will combine them all together. I'm interested in graduate study, how to choose a good theological school for my graduate study. Should I go to the West? Should I remain in the East? There is one problem here, he said. In Indonesia, we have few seminaries that offer doctoral program, but the quality is questionable. So what would you advise?
Yeah, I would like to respond first because this is my area that I deal with every day. Excuse me, Dr. Harjanto.
I agree with you.
You do agree.
Where I am ministering now as an international director for Langham Scholars, we are supporting 85 women and men who are doing their PhD this year. We just accepted 21 new ones. By the way, one of them is also from Indonesia that we accepted this year. In fact, we are trying to encourage our scholars to do their PhD in their own context. So if there is a good doctoral program in South Africa, in Philippines, or in Indonesia, we encourage the scholar to go there and remain in the context and do a PhD in that context. Having said that, those who prefer to do their PhD in their own context, country or region, sometimes, we do offer them the advantage of going to Cambridge, to Oxford, to Asbury, to Wheaton, to Trinity, to spend maybe 1 to 6 months or maybe more in order to be exposed to what's going on outside their own context. So in fact, now we have 85 current PhD scholars doing their PhD. Almost 60% of them are doing their PhD either in their own seminaries or institutions, in their own context, or through a split site arrangement, which means, you are not required to spend long residency in a certain country. For instance, Oxford Center for Mission Studies requires you to come maybe for 2 weeks or 3 weeks a year for your PhD. So we also encourage this kind of thing. Finally, I should say that we try our best to equip doctoral programs in majority world as much as we can. So for instance, now we are working with SciEx, the school in Bangalore, to train their faculty how to supervise PhD dissertations and how to supervise PhD students. So we also extend some help. Maybe we can, at some stage, we can offer Bandung Theological Seminary this kind of training, how to equip supervisors, and hopefully in the future, you can offer an excellent PhD program. So instead of sending Asian scholars to Britain or to US, where they think they have the best education, I think we can send them to Bandung to do their PhD.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, Pak Sutrisna, do you have any response for it?
I will just add a few more things, 1 or 2. I think each choice will have its own pluses and minuses. So, for example, speaking about academic quality, the heritage in the Western academic culture is still quite far in front of, for example, in most Asian or other majority world academic culture. And also, for example, speaking about research culture, community of scholars, you will get it when you go to the West. Of course, the network is in the West. But speaking about theological reflection, I think that is the problem. There is less and less possibilities of doing theological reflection with your colleges from the same context. If we see that theological reflection development is important, that will be one of the things that you will miss. And then speaking about network, you will miss the network of friends from your context. Those are some of the things that I can add. Thank you.
Very interesting. Now we move on to the next one regarding COVID-19 and digital learning. So here the question. In the past, we have negative thinking about people who join worship service on TV. But nowadays, every one of us, no other choice. But every one of us must have our Sunday worship online. Slowly, this has become our habit. We have online service, online prayer meeting, funerals, even we have virtual lunch and gathering. Digital is not just a tool or culture, but it has become digital religion. How does theological education anticipate this trend? What are some of the challenges and opportunity that come with it? Dr. Riyad or Dr. Sutrisno want to come first?
You know, normally, globally speaking, when we have any kind of innovation usually starts with business. So the business are the first who go into innovations, and also would start with sciences. They are also very keen to go to new ideas, to innovations. Education comes at the end of the spectrum when it comes to innovation. And theological education would come also at the far end of the spectrum when it comes to innovation, which is really sad. So for instance, digital distance learning or online learning have started a long time ago in other disciplines like even engineering and sciences and so on. But it was very limited, widespread in terms of theological education. So we came very late to this. Anyway, what I would like to say is that the aspect of having fellowship face-to-face cannot be done through any other means. You know, I did, for instance, I studied in 5 universities in my life in different countries: Philippines, Canada, USA, Britain, Syria, Lebanon, and so on. And I did a master in nonprofit management through distance learning with a university, Jesuit University in Denver. So I had some experience in that kind of learning, but I think there is nothing would substitute to face-to-face interaction. This is why I really hope that we can bring a good hybrid system, whether in a shared setting or in theological education, where we have the best of digital technology, but also the best of face-to-face interaction.
Can we do it in Indonesia, Pak Sutrisno?
Yes, we can. We are going in that direction. We must.
We have to, yeah.
We have to. That is for our survival, but hopefully not just for our survival, but we can have the agility to innovate and to develop better educational approach in the new situation. So I want to respond from another perspective. So I think from that perspective is already very good. I remember this is about how theological seminary should respond a new thing that come, a new culture that come with all the ethical issues that come with the digital culture. Like communion, online communion, some churches doing that. Yeah, of course, online service and everything else. So I remember that when I did my MDiv in Trinity Singapore, Trinity Theological College, I noticed that they just did a collaboration between churches and the National Council of Churches in Singapore. and the seminary, in this case, Trinity. So they try to respond to a perplexing issue about LGBT in the time, many years ago. And I get the bulletin, I get the result of the research. So I noticed that they have like a 6-month project, one scholar doing from Old Testament perspective, another scholar from New Testament perspective, another scholar from historical perspective, another from sociological perspective. And I remember that another one is from the pastoral perspective. So I was quite amazed, and I see this is a good model. This is what churches and seminary should do even more. So addressing ethical questions, new things that come by collaboration. I'm thinking about that kind of response, that instead of webinar here, webinar there, everyone make their own webinar. Why don't seminaries and churches have a collaboration to make a serious research for a certain period of time to address those theological and ethical issues together?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hybrid collaboration. Why not? All right, okay.
Next is about accreditation. Theological education is also considered academic institution. So they need to go to accreditation under the government policy or maybe under other kind of association. In what ways accreditation can be beneficial or harmful to theological education? What do you think, Dr. Ryan?
A few years ago, I was in a meeting in Boston where we brought Western theological institutions, presidents of Western theological institutions, and also president of non-Western theological institutions together. And during that conference, I was sitting with presidents of maybe top seminaries in the US, like, Wheaton, Fuller, Dana Theological Seminary, Trinity, and so on. And I asked them a question about accreditation. I said, accreditation normally is focusing on the institution. For instance, do they have the right faculty? Do they have the right library? Do they have the right curriculum? Do they have the right facility? And so on. So my question was, do you focus on what happens in the life of your students after they graduate? And to my surprise, none of them responded positively to my question. So the focus is on this period of study, but what would happen next, it was not their interest. Maybe it was an interest of the church or denomination or the student. What I'm saying, I think that would be one major issue in accreditation, when accreditation is only focusing on what's happening now in the institution without taking into consideration, are we preparing the right people for the right job after? And are we following up with them after they graduate to make sure that we really prepare them in the right way? So many institutions are in fact focusing on producing what they think they have produced the right, student or graduate, but what's happening next is not evaluated in the right direction. This is why I said that it's really important to focus on the impact of our graduates after graduation, maybe after 5 years, 10 years. This is not easy to do it. But I think this point has been missing in accreditation for many years. But now, some accrediting agencies are asking these questions, which is really good. What is happening in the life of your graduates? Of course, accreditation is very important. It is a way to wake up, to have fresh ideas, to evaluate what we are doing. So there are many good aspects of accreditation. But that would be the only issue that I'm concerned of when accreditation focuses on the now and not on the future of our graduates. Thank you.
Yeah, true.
Pak Sutrisna mau bicara sesuatu soal akreditasi?
No, for this question, I just would like to say Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
And
Amen.
then this is a question
Yes, already.
specifically for Bapak Sutrisna. I will read it in Indonesia. Bapak Sutrisna, apakah ketujuh pendekatan pendidikan teologi yang misioner dapat diterapkan bagi pembinaan dan pemuritan jemaat di gereja? Jika bisa, barangkali penyesuaian apa yang harus dilakukan? Terima kasih.
Okay, this is the question about whether the missional approach of educational theology can be applied in church setting. I think there will be a limitation for theological seminaries to do everything. They cannot just do everything. So what we have to do is to work together between seminaries and churches. I think if we want to draw more clear boundaries, or not boundaries, but share the workload, perhaps it is the responsibility of more of the seminaries to teach the leaders or those who are being prepared to be leaders. And it is the responsibility of the church to teach everyone. The second one, this is related with the previous question. It is the responsibility of the church to lay the basic foundation of discipleship, of basic beliefs, of basic relationship with God, basic walk with God. Those kind of things need to be emphasized more in the church education. I noticed that when people already have certain foundation in their spiritual life, when they come to learn in theological seminaries, they are ready to learn more conceptual struggles, learn more abstract issues in depth. But when they don't have enough foundation for their daily life with God, daily life with others, it's very difficult for them. There will be separate mind and daily life. So that's the second. And I think one more thing is that what we are trying to do, like what we are trying to do in Bandung Theological Seminary, my friend, my colleague, Pak Johan Setiawan, has a very big passion to help churches to develop materials that can be helpful for church education. But if we ask churches to develop their own, it will be difficult. So we are preparing series that we will record, and we have to do the trial in the Vocatio setting, that we hope in the future there will be a series of recorded materials like Reframe from Regent College, a series of recorded materials, a series of discussion questions, material for small group application together with video and together with the framework. So in the future, we hope that churches can just use the materials. It can be beneficial for many people. This kind of collaboration, I think we should develop. Thank you.
This is interesting. In Indonesia, we observe there is a change in degree and program offered by theological seminary. We used to have MDiv, Master of Divinity, but now we also heard about Master of Theology, Master of Philosophy in Religion, Master of Science of Theology, so on and so forth. What do you think about these changes? Are theological seminary trying to be more scientific and appealing to the society, or maybe something else happening? Do you think these changes are good or bad sign? Dr. Riyad and Dr. Sutrisna, what do you think?
I think we observe this not just in Indonesia, but in many countries. But I think the basic foundational question that should be asked, what is our motivation in offering a degree? Is our motivation just to imitate what's going on in universities or maybe in seminaries in North America or Europe? Is our motivation coming out of the need that we see in our churches, communities, country? So I think the motivation behind this is really important. The second question that should be asked, after having the right motivation, which should be caring for our churches, caring for our communities, rather than caring for our reputation and having, more programs and degrees. The other question is, do we have the right audience for this degree, or just we are inventing a degree and then we are trying to recruit audience and students for this degree? I think we should start by asking, what is our targeted audience and why do we need to help them? Rather than having a degree because we think it's a great degree or because we want to compete with our institutions. So I think these are two important questions. our motivation? And second, do we have the right audience for such a degree? If we can respond in a serious, positive way to these questions, I think then we can go ahead and try to find what would be really needed in our own context.
I agree with that. So motivation and audience should be the reason for choosing which direction that we should go. In relation with that, I was just reminded that giving a degree is a responsibility. So
true.
as theological educators, we have a responsibility to make sure that the degree that we give will be something that will be a good one, that will come with quality. We are in Indonesia facing big waves of changes from time to time in recent years. So I think my previous principal, Pak Agus Gunawan, has already gone through that difficult situation.
Yeah.
And we are now continuing with Budwi and many others, the team, how to go forward in the right direction, but at the same time facing major changes in the governmental regulation. There is no easy answer. So I noticed that different seminaries, they try to overcome the situation in different ways. It's a long discussion.
Yes, it is.